Good afternoon, everyone. If everybody could find a seat, that would be wonderful. I'd like to welcome everyone to our March Leadership Workshop Series. I'm Collins Brown. I'm the Assistant Director for Student Life and Development, and we are so excited to have a crowd here and to have Dan Amos speak to us today and to speak to you all today. Just a couple of reminders as we begin. Those of you that are here for extra credit, we will be handing out tickets on the way out. Some of you might have class at 1:30, so just know that it's okay to sneak out at 5 till or 10 till, 1:20, 1:25, and we'll have those extra credit tickets at the door for you to get. That's not a problem, so we'll let you out. Just please do so respectfully and quietly. Is everyone excited to be here today? All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started so Dan can get through his presentation and open up for kind of some Q&A at the end. So I'm going to introduce him. Dan Amos is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Aflac Incorporated, a Fortune 125 company, the leading provider of supplemental insurance in the United States and the #1 provider of life insurance in Japan. Headquartered right here in Columbus, Aflac insures more than 50 million people worldwide. Dan is currently in his 24th year of Aflac's chief executive, making him the 5th longest serving CEO in the Fortune 500. During his time as CEO, Aflac and its shareholders have enjoyed significant growth from annual revenues of just under $3 billion in 1990 to nearly $24 billion today, and a market capitalization of nearly $30 billion. In 2000, Mr. Amos was the driving force in launching the iconic Aflac Duck, which transformed Aflac into a top national brand. Today, the Aflac Duck is a part of popular culture in both the United States and Japan. Under Dan's leadership in 2014, Aflac was named by Fortune magazine as one of America's most admired companies for the 13th time. They are also the only insurance company to appear for 16 consecutive years on Fortune's list of 100 best companies to work for, and the Ethisphere magazine's annual list of the world's most ethical companies for 7 consecutive years. In his more than 2 decades at the helm, Dan Amos has made Aflac an international household name, yet he has never forgotten his roots here in Columbus, which he still calls home. We are indeed fortunate to have him here today to share his stories with us. Please welcome Aflac Chairman and CEO Dan Amos.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I found that my experience as a CEO, not just about speaking, but rather only part of it, and having an opportunity during the Q&A session where you can ask me anything about the company that might be of interest to you. Let me start off by just saying a little bit about Aflac. I'm willing to bet that most of you are at least familiar with Aflac to some degree. But if you go back and look at the past, the name Aflac was not that familiar. If you go back to when the new millennium changed, at that particular time, only about 7% of the population knew the name Aflac or American Family. But all of that changed with the introduction of the Aflac Duck. When it came on the scene, we moved from 7%, and today, now 9 out of 10 people, actually 93% of the U.S. population now knows the name Aflac. I hope you've enjoyed seeing some of the antics of the Aflac Duck over a period of time, as it has now, we are in our 70th commercial with the Aflac Duck. Let me briefly describe to you our business. Often when an illness or an accident occurs, people are burdened by many unexpected out-of-pocket medical and non-medical costs. This is true whether or not you're covered by major medical insurance or you might be covered by national health care in Japan. The Aflac policies provide cash to people to help cover many of the expenses that they never thought would occur, like co-pays, deductibles, and then they can use that money for everyday expenses. Essentially, our products are to protect policyholders' income and their assets so they can focus on recovery instead of the financial stress that it can cause. With many of the financial hardships people have been facing and with the evolving healthcare landscape, we believe that people need our protection now more than they ever have. Now, before we created products to bring to the market, we had to evaluate the relative risk and the price of the policies accordingly. That's because in the insurance business, we don't avoid risk, but rather we manage risk. In business and in life, everyone has to find their own way at how they would evaluate risk. On that note, I view and look at things every day as I rely on the three principles of risk management in insurance. Now, I learned this at the University of Georgia when I was there, but I can tell all of you, I took some courses at Columbus State many, many years ago. So I have sat where you have sat and actually taken courses. And I will tell you these three principles of risk management you can use in your everyday life for anything that you do, and you can use it in your business life as well. And the principles are, don't risk a lot for a little, don't risk more than you can afford to lose, and consider the odds. Now, let me give you some insight in how the outlandish advertising featuring the Aflac duck survived the filter of those three principles of risk management, and how it went on to actually change everything about our company because of the Aflac duck. Back in 1998, it was clear that the Aflac advertising was not growing at the pace we needed it to grow, and we needed to achieve meaningful brand recognition. And so we had to come up with something that was different, bold, that would capture the attention of consumers. Faced with that decision, our advertising campaign, I called upon these three principles of risk management. And the one would be is don't risk a lot for a little. Well, when we were looking at this new commercial with the Aflac duck, because of the animatics that deals with the same people that did Jurassic Park actually make our Aflac duck, it would cost $1 million to make the commercial. At that time, we'd never spent more than about $400,000 or $500,000, and we thought, well, that's a lot of money, but we would be risking a little bit for a lot if it actually hit, so we didn't mind that. Second was don't risk more than you can afford to lose. Well, no one likes to lose $1 million, but certainly we could afford to lose $1 million, and we were willing to take that chance with this commercial. And then, what are the odds, or consider the odds? And here's where it got a little more complicated, because at that time, which was 1998, we tested two commercials. The first commercial was a commercial with Ray Romano, and if you'll remember at that time, you were all young, but he had the #1 TV show, Everyone Loves Raymond, on TV. And he was making a commercial with kids, and in the end, it formed building blocks and had the word Aflac. That was the highest commercial we'd ever tested. It tested about 30% higher than the industry, and it was a very strong commercial for us. So we thought, okay, it's traditional in nature, it'll do very well. But out comes this outlandish commercial with the Aflac duck. And when we considered it, we thought, well, we'll just see how it tested. It actually tested 2.5 times better than the Ray Romano, so that meant it tested 2.5 times higher than the industry average, and it was off the charts. But the problem was we were making fun of our name. And so were you willing to take that chance of making fun of your name? And also at that time, you thought about insurance companies. They were, Prudential had The Rock. Everything dealt with financial security and safety. And back then, you didn't have the Geico ads, you didn't have others. So here we were going to be out here way out on a limb taking a chance. But I realized when I started this process that I said all along I would go with whatever tested the highest, provided it was done in good taste. And this was done in good taste, but it still made me a nervous wreck what would actually happen with it. So I said, well, let's go ahead and think about that. So I decided, okay, we're going to do it. But here was the hard part. I tried to explain to people prior to making it what it was going to be. Now, you've seen it, so you know how. But if you can imagine me trying to explain to someone, well, we're going to have this duck, and he's going to be in the park, and he's going to quack Aflac. I will never forget the expressions I would get. People would just stare at me like, are you kidding me? Are you really going to do this? And I finally quit explaining it to people. I realized I couldn't get it across. And so I finally just said, you're just going to have to trust me and wait and see how this goes. And if it doesn't go well, we'll pull it. But I believe that it will go well. And just as we were about to running it, it all of a sudden hit me that I'd bet my whole damn career on an Aflac duck. But I want to show you the first commercial. This was the original commercial that we ran, and so here it goes.
Well, when I got hurt in this work, thought I had supplemental insurance.
Supplemental insurance? What's that?
Aflac.
Well, even best insurance doesn't give you cash to cover things like lost pay, other expenses. This does.
What does?
Aflac.
Shouldn't ask about it at work.
Really? And what's it called?
Aflac!
Aflac. Without it, no insurance is complete.
Aflac.
Well, we were fortunate. The Aflac duck commercial took off. It became one of the most successful advertising campaigns in the history of advertising in the United States. Today, this campaign has propelled our brand recognition from 7% to 93%, which puts us with names like Apple and Coca-Cola and Nike, just to name a few. Although the Aflac duck has been a big story for us, never is there a better example, though, of thinking big and measuring risk than when we actually decided to get licensed in Japan. John Amos, my uncle, and Aflac's principal founder, was traveling to Osaka, Japan to visit the World's Fair. While there, he noticed the Japanese wearing surgical masks and asked, why are they wearing it? He was told that they wanted to avoid spreading a cold. At that moment, it dawned upon him that if people in Japan were that health conscious and risk averse, then they would buy insurance. And from then on, he decided that he wanted to get licensed there. He believed that a society that would go to such lengths to avoid the risk of the common cold would most certainly embrace Aflac's insurance. And brother, was he right. After 4 years of hard work, we finally got licensed in 1974 to sell insurance in Japan, becoming the second insurance company, American insurance company, in 29 years to receive permission to sell insurance in Japan. Fast forward that to 2013, when Aflac Japan wrote more than $2.9 billion in new sales. Today, we insure 1 out of 4 households in Japan. Our name recognition is even stronger in Japan than in the United States at 97%. Aflac is the #1 insurance company in Japan in terms of policies in force, passing upon life, who held that title for over 100 years. Our operations in Japan account for 3/4 of our earnings there. Of those results, we go back and we look now and we realize that it all started in 1970 in Osaka with the World's Fair, a gut instinct, surgical mask, and a calculated risk. My message to each of you in this room is that a big dose of optimism tempered with a measure of reality can equate to endless possibilities if you dare to think big. Of course, we all know that more often than not, big ideas don't work out. The late CEO of Coca-Cola, Roberto Goizueta, was known to say, "You only stumble when you're moving." I would emphasize that long-term success means you just have to keep moving. When one idea fails, you move on to the next one. Each one will bring you upon another idea. One of us will stumble sometimes. I can just guarantee you that's part of the process we all go through. But never let failure get in the way of what ultimately will be success. So keep pushing. Remember, if you never stumble, maybe you should consider whether you're really challenging yourself, because I've failed many times in my career. Now let me touch on the information I shared a moment ago about our presence in Japan, because it helps set the stage for how our company managed through 2011, one of the most difficult years we ever had. 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan happened 3 years ago today. It was 3 years ago today when I got that telephone call. As you probably recall, this series of devastating disasters caused by ultimately had more than 20,000 deaths. Absolute devastation certainly tested the resolve of millions of Japanese. You know, in life, all of us are presented with challenges and overcoming those difficult situations. And if there's one thing that I can tell you will get you off track, it's a disaster. But we're all going to be faced with disasters in one form or another as we move through life. The earthquake and the tsunami and nuclear issues certainly presented Aflac with a crisis of huge proportion. But never in a million years did I think we'd be managing through two crises at the same time. Yet that's exactly what played out 3 years ago today. The second crisis of the brand seems small in comparison to what happened with the nuclear disaster and tsunami and earthquake. But it was very big to us because it represented our brand and our company. That's because, like most companies, Aflac works very hard at protecting the brand and enhancing the brand image. Let me tell you a little more about the two crises we faced and how we managed through those crises and stayed on track, starting with the earthquake. You may recognize this chilling clip from 3 years ago. Let me run this clip.
Off the coast of Sendai, in northern Japan, a succession of extraordinary waves, some said to be 10 meters high, accelerate towards the shoreline. Striking land, the massive surge turns into a black wall of water, unstoppable by man-made structures. Despite a tsunami warning, many are caught out. To the right of screen, some motorists drive away, but others on the highway seem unaware of what's approaching across the field and have little chance of escaping it. A swirling kaleidoscope of broken buildings and floating cars. These images clearly capture the power of the tsunami, but from above it's hard to calculate how many people are caught up in it. Only those on elevated land could possibly avoid it.
We now know that that earthquake was a 9.0. We also know now that the wave actually reached, are you ready for this? 130 feet high. I'm on the 14th floor at Aflac. That means it came all the way up to the 14th floor of the Aflac building to realize what a devastating earthquake it really was. But following this devastation, We were fortunate to quickly learn that all of our employees were safe and accounted for. That Friday morning that it happened, Aflac was the very first company to donate to the victims of the devastation through the Red Cross. We gave 100 million yen, which was about $1.2 million. And we're also relieved to find out that our corporate operations in Tokyo were up and running, ready to assist Japanese policyholders when they needed us most. We even had a backup center in Osaka, Japan, about 250 miles south, that was ready to assume any of the workload should Tokyo go down. By mid-morning on Friday, several media outlets were calling our offices looking for information because they knew of our close ties to Japan. Those who work closely with me know that one of my favorite sayings is that bad news does not improve with age. By this I mean, even if it's good news, or even if it isn't good news, you need to talk about it. But especially if it isn't good news, you don't wait to deliver it. I believe that it's important to share that kind of news as quickly and as accurately as possible to begin dealing with it effectively. The fact is, people can handle bad news. What they can't handle is uncertainty. Don't get me wrong, the news that we had to share wasn't necessarily all bad. In fact, there was a lot of good news to share. Our employees were safe, our business operations were running, and we didn't expect a material impact on claims or our earnings. But there was a lot that we just simply did not know. But even with the lack of information, it doesn't mean that you can stand back and let uncertainty fester. We take our responsibility to communicate with everyone we do business with very seriously, and I think the media clip that you'll see in a moment will prove just that. To me, this kind of communication and transparency is critical for many reasons. First, it's the right thing to do, and over time it establishes credibility and consistency with those who count on us. I think that it's evident also with what happened with our stock that day. When you realize that 75% of your earnings come from Japan, and all of a sudden they've had this catastrophe, you wonder, is it just going to kill the stock? But because we had been transparent, we had very little market reaction, and although it did drop slightly that day due to investors' concerns, I believe it would have dropped much more had we not communicated transparently. So briefly, take a look at this clip.
Aflac CEO Dan Amos turns in right now by phone. Dan, good to have you back. What's it like there? What have you been hearing there?
Well, I've been talking to our people almost hourly, and of course, Tokyo is coming back to normal. When it first hit, basically the airport was shut down, the rails were shut down. They're beginning to come back.
Joining us by phone is the CEO of that company, Dan Amos. Welcome to In Business. First off, have you accounted for all of your employees?
Yes, we have. I've been in constant contact almost since the quake hit. And the majority of our employees, about 80%, are in Tokyo. We have 6 offices that were affected by the quake, but we are accounted for all the employees.
This is when I say that we're really on and we have to show that we can perform and why people need it. So we will have claims that are due to the accidents and whatever that might occur in addition to that, to the death claims. And what part of the problem will be how to file death claims. And we're going to make it as simple as we possibly can. You may recall that the U.S. State Department issued a voluntary evacuation warning for travel to Japan, predominantly because of the nuclear issues that were out there. With so many foreign companies pulling their employees out, many of the Japanese people, though, that were there, including our employees, felt alone and alienated. I can remember Bloomberg specifically. There was only about 8 employees that had stayed, and they had over 200 that had left when all of that took place. So warning and evaluations aside, 2 days later, I was on a flight to Japan. By the way, there wasn't anybody on the flight with me either. I'm here to tell you. That was one of the best decisions, though, I ever made, was to go over there. I was able to convey the message of support and prayer that had been asked to give them from the people here in the U.S. Our Japanese employees were touched by the messages of support from our people. Of course, at that time, that was a very huge crisis we faced. But while all of that's going on the other side, all of a sudden, everyone who had worked hard to build on the brand knows how important a brand is. And here is, with all this going on, you would find it hard to believe, but what we had happening is that while we were still hearing about the earthquake, the voice of the Aflac Duck, who was Gilbert Gottfried, decided to tweet jokes about the situation. But they weren't remotely funny at all. They were hurtful and insulting to the Japanese people. I was then faced with a decision. One thing I'd encourage you to do, or to take away from today's talk, is how rapidly you have to respond to today's environment. And you probably know this, but my age generation is stunned over how quickly you have to respond in today's environment, because everything is instantaneous. Gilbert Gottfried posted his tweet. The media was calling our headquarters within 10 minutes. Within 10 minutes, I was getting calls. Several years ago, that would have never happened. A reporter would have called you a day later, or at the most 7-8 hours later, but this was in 10 minutes. Today, not only do you have to be decisive, but you have to do it quickly. Because of the response that had been made, we were put back on our heels of what do we do and how do we respond. We knew that the reporter was going to write something, and we had to respond accordingly. If we didn't, we would lose control of the message. Think of it this way. The patient calls me, says, I want to get a comment from you. I said, well, how about calling me back tomorrow? He writes, or she writes, a report that day that says, Aflac is debating what to do. That you've lost already. So in a matter of, I asked the reporter to give me 15 minutes, because I didn't know about it the first 10. I said, give me 15 minutes. And she said, why 15 minutes? I said, will you give me longer? And she said, no. I said, well, then 15 minutes. And in 15 minutes, I called her back, and I told her that we had made a decision and that we were letting Gilbert Gottfried go. And within a matter of 15 minutes, we fired him, knowing that every commercial that we had made would have to be pulled off the air. We immediately assembled a team of people to work on how the Aflac Duck would find its voice again. As a team, we certainly had to be creative because we literally had no advertising. Well, almost no advertising. While we were searching the U.S. far and wide to figure out who the next voice of the Aflac Duck would be, we resurrected a commercial that we forgot we had called Silent Movie. And we pulled it out of the archives and we adapted it. And at that time, it was the only commercial that didn't feature Gilbert Gottfried as our voice. So we used it. So take a look at this. So as you saw, we adapted it and put on there, if you want to be the voice of the Aflac duck, then go to our website. And believe it or not, seeking or people wanting to be the voice of the Aflac duck went crazy. We had a whopping 11,200 people submit entries and additions to be the chance to be the voice of the Aflac duck. Rather than telling you about it, let me show you a clip from the CBS Evening News, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Please note that on the film as you watch it, that we're noted as being America's most famous duck.
And America's most famous duck is about to get a new quack. Finally tonight, the job market is starting to pick up again. In fact, one job that's become available involves selling insurance. The main qualification, the ability to sound like a duck. Mark Strassman tells us the line of applicants was long and loud.
Think of it as American Idol.
I am the next Aflac duck.
Meets Planet.
I have webbed feet, I walk like a duck, and I had a dream that I was a duck this morning.
A national audition to find the voice of Aflac's next spokesduck. The one Americans heard in 10,000 commercials a year.
What'd you say? Aflac!
The star of the company's $100 million plus advertising budget.
Why not? Why not me?
Aflac!
New Yorker Bradley Ellison has the gravelly voice.
Aflac!
I think I'm good. I think I'm like one of the final 10.
After 11 years, last month the Aflac duck lost the only voice it ever had.
Aflac!
Shock comedian Gilbert Gottfried. But Gottfried offended Aflac with jokes about Japanese tsunami victims. The insurance giant does 75% of its business in Japan. So CEO Dan Amos fired him.
The first thing is panic. You know, a crisis has just occurred. What is going to be our next step here?
Well, find a new duck voice.
That wasn't funny, dude.
Not exactly what Aflac executives learned at business school. More than 11,000 people auditioned online. Hundreds more in person, doing their duck in a variety of moods. Laugh if you want. For Aflac, getting it right is no joke.
Aflac!
By month's end, the company will pick a new voice.
Well, you want me to say Aflac in Spanish?
The job pays low six figures just to quack one word. Well, is this a great country or what?
Never dreamt that I would be quacking for my living.
Mark Strassman, CBS News, Atlanta.
Soon after the situation with Gilbert Gottfried received an email from a producer at NBC who had coordinated the media for all of the NBC affiliates in the United States for more than 20 years about the decision to sever the ties with Gilbert Gottfried and search for a new voice. He said, quote, "This is the best example of turning a black eye into a beauty mark that I've ever seen in my PR world, perhaps ever." I wish I could tell you that we were that smart, but sometimes luck falls your way. And luck combined with convictions, because you have to let your principles be your guide as you work toward achieving your objectives. I think the events that we faced proved to me that when you're decisive, you are transparent, and ultimately you're trying to do the right thing, it will reflect in your company and in your image. We certainly were overjoyed that the Aflac duck finally got its voice back. Let me run two of our most recent commercials, and hopefully you might have seen these already.
Got him. Yeah, he's clean, boss.
Now listen to me, Duck. I have an associate that met with an unfortunate accident. While he's been incapacitated, somebody's been paying him cash. Now, is this your doing?
Aflac?
Now, if I met with some such accident, would Aflac pay me? Nice. This is your stop.
Find out what Aflac can do for you and your family
Aflac?
at Aflac.com.
Aflac! 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 Aflac!
me he was good, dude.
Yeah, he stinks at golf, but he was great to get my claim paid fast.
How fast?
Mine got paid in 4 days.
Wow, that's awesome. Is that legal?
Big fat new.
Find out how fast Aflac can pay you at Aflac.com.
I thought the golfers at Columbus State might like that. I hope you enjoyed these commercials. I'm often asked, how did the Aflac duck respond so well in Japan when it was created in the United States? Well, with experience, it's become clear to me that you can't use a one-size-fits-all when you're doing international advertising. So ever since 2003, we have established the Aflac duck, and we debuted it there. And we did a quieter, gentler version of the Aflac duck to match with the Japanese culture itself. So yes, that means that we did not have to pull all of our Gilbert Gottfried commercials at that particular time because it was a softer voice. The Aflac duck continues to be extremely popular in Japan. If you travel to Asia, you might be familiar with the good luck character called the Meineke Neko, or the beckoning cat, that's usually shown with a raised paw as you see here. With such different advertising tastes, it's probably hard to fathom that we hit something really big when we introduced a relatively new character called the Meineke Neko duck. We just added a little different twist to the character with the Aflac duck, but rather than telling you about it, let me show you something. So run this commercial.
線の手術に安心を招き猫ダーク先進医療も通院も招き猫ダーク猫とアヒルが力を合わせてみんなの幸せを招き猫ダーク上手たくさん安心を招きます医療保険新エバーの誕生です
The success of the Meineke Neko duck is nothing short of a phenomenon. It became overnight a sensation. When the cat duck commercial launched, it soared to #1, beating every commercial in every industry in Japan. The jingle that you heard became so popular, became the #1 download on cell phones throughout Japan. As you can see, the Meineke Neko actually brought Aflac good luck as well. We have experienced a tremendous amount of success leveraging the strong brand in our efforts to drive sales. For example, to promote the new medical product, we recently launched another campaign in Japan featuring Black Swan, a dark character that represents the arch nemesis of the Aflac duck. The Black Swan's goal is to tempt consumers to make bad decisions about life and health insurance. But the Aflac duck comes to the rescue, reminding consumers to make sound, positive, healthy choices in life, including decisions to purchase not only Aflac insurance. So take a look.
Medical insurance for women? Yes, thought it's about time to buy one. True, women's disease is a bit worrying.
Unnecessary.
Black Swan? It's been following me around.
Don't worry, you're tough. You won't catch a disease.
How irresponsible and rude of you.
Aflac! No, not again.
For women who consider seriously, a brand new medical insurance for women responding ever more to your needs.
I wanted to have edamame at least.
When it rings a bell.
Aflac!
That commercial has become the most popular commercial in the insurance industry right now and continues to grow. I hope you get a sense for the Aflac duck commercials in Japan and how consumers see them. They are different from U.S. commercials, but as I said, they helped us achieve a 97% name recognition in Japan. Advertising and branding certainly have a huge impact on the image of the company, and so do the company's ethics. I was also brought up to believe that a business can thrive if and when it does things ethically and at the same time it is helping others. I was brought up also to believe that if you take care of the employees, they will take care of the business. And that's the framework under which I manage the company today.